March 12, 2011, 3:36 p.m. A hydrogen explosion rips through the reactor building of Unit 1 at Fukushima Daiichi. The blast blows apart the outer containment, sending concrete and steel debris flying hundreds of meters. Workers scramble in the control room, gauges go dark, radiation alarms scream. This was not supposed to happen. Japan, a nation that prides itself on technological mastery and disaster preparedness, had built a nuclear plant that was about to fail catastrophically. The world would soon learn that this was not an act of God, but a failure of foresight, of regulation, and of a culture that prioritized image over safety. The tsunami had already struck the day before. What followed was a cascade of errors, half-truths, and desperation that would force 150,000 people from their homes. This is Fukushima, how a tsunami triggered a nuclear catastrophe, and the truth Japan tried to conceal. Before the disaster, Fukushima Daiichi was a model of efficiency. Operated by Tokyo Electric Power Company, TEPCO, the plant had 6 boiling water reactors that supplied power to millions. On a typical day, engineers monitored control rooms filled with analog gauges and warning lights. The plant was designed to withstand earthquakes. Japan's building codes were among the strictest in the world, but the design basis for tsunamis was far lower. The seawall protecting the plant was only 5.7 meters high. According to declassified documents, internal studies had warned that waves could exceed 10 meters. Those warnings were buried. The plant's emergency diesel generators were located in the basement, a fatal oversight. On March 11, 2011 at 2:46 p.m., the ground shook for 6 minutes. The reactors automatically shut down. But the real threat was already moving across the Pacific. Warning signs had been accumulating for years. In 2008, a TEPCO internal report estimated that a tsunami over 15 meters could strike the plant. No action was taken. The Japan Nuclear Safety Organization had also flagged vulnerabilities, but regulatory capture meant the watchdogs were toothless. According to a later parliamentary investigation, TEPCO executives were aware that the plant's design was outdated. They chose not to upgrade because it would require costly shutdowns. The culture of mutual dependency, meant that regulators and operators colluded to avoid scrutiny. Workers who raised concerns were silenced. One engineer, Masao Yoshida, the plant manager, had repeatedly requested better seawalls and backup power. His requests were denied. On the morning of March 11, 2011, the plant was operating at full capacity. At 2:46 p.m., the earthquake struck. The reactors scrammed, but the tsunami was still 40 minutes away. The decision that made disaster inevitable was made decades earlier, placing the emergency generators in the basement. But the critical moment came after the earthquake. At 3:27 p.m., the first wave of the tsunami, over 14 meters high, swept over the seawall. Water flooded the turbine buildings, drowning the generators. In the control rooms, lights flickered and died. The reactors, now without power, could not circulate cooling water. The core temperatures began to rise. Operators had one option: use portable generators. But the tsunami had also washed away the roads and fuel supplies. According to the official investigation, TEPCO had not rehearsed a station blackout scenario. The decision to not prepare for a beyond design basis event was a calculated risk. That risk had now become a reality. In the following hours, the cores of Units 1, 2, and 3 would begin to melt down. The containment of radioactive materials was about to fail. With no cooling, the water in the reactor pressure vessels boiled away. The fuel rods, now exposed, reached temperatures over 2,800 degrees Celsius. The zirconium cladding reacted with steam to produce hydrogen gas. In Unit 1, the hydrogen accumulated in the reactor building. At 3:36 p.m. on March 12th, it detonated. The blast blew off the roof and outer walls, but the inner containment vessel held, for now. In Unit 3, a similar explosion occurred on March 14th, hurling debris over 500 meters. Unit 2 suffered a different fate. A breach in the suppression chamber allowed radioactive water and gas to escape. The cores of all 3 reactors melted down, some fuel melting through the reactor vessels and pooling on the concrete floor of the containment. The disaster was now releasing radioactive cesium-137, iodine-131, and strontium-90 into the atmosphere. The wind carried contamination over the Pacific Ocean and across Japan. In the immediate aftermath, TEPCO and the Japanese government downplayed the severity. Prime Minister Naoto Kan was briefed that the situation was under control, but on site, workers were facing impossible conditions. Radiation levels in the turbine building reached 400 millisieverts per hour, 4 times the annual limit for nuclear workers. Firefighters and plant employees, many without adequate protective gear, were deployed to pump seawater into the reactors. They worked in shifts of just minutes to avoid lethal doses. According to declassified documents, TEPCO initially refused to use seawater because it would permanently ruin the reactors, a decision that delayed cooling and worsened the meltdown. The company also failed to report the full extent of the radiation leaks to the government for hours. The cover-up had begun. Information was withheld from the public, and evacuation zones were not expanded quickly enough. People in nearby towns were exposed to dangerous levels of radiation. By March 15th, the full horror became clear to the international community. Radiation readings near the plant hit 400 millisieverts per hour. The U.S. Navy, stationed offshore, detected airborne radiation and advised its ships to move 50 nautical miles away. The International Atomic Energy Agency demanded accurate data, but Japan's reports were incomplete. On March 16th, a fire broke out in Unit 4's spent fuel pool, releasing more radiation. Helicopters attempted to drop water from above, but were turned back by high radiation. The world watched as Japan struggled to contain a disaster that was spiraling out of control. The French Institute for Radiological Protection called it a catastrophe on the scale of Chernobyl. TEPCO's stock price collapsed. The Japanese government finally admitted that a meltdown had occurred, days after the fact. The cover-up was unraveling, but the damage was done. The radioactive plume was spreading across the globe. The human cost was immense. Over 150,000 people were evacuated from a 20-kilometer zone around the plant. Many were forced to leave homes, farms, and livelihoods behind. The evacuation itself caused casualties. Elderly patients in hospitals died from stress and lack of care. Children developed thyroid nodules from radiation exposure, though the long-term cancer risk remains disputed. Workers at the plant, many of them temporary laborers, received high doses of radiation. According to estimates, over 2,000 plant workers and contractors received cumulative doses above 100 millisieverts. The government designated a no-go zone that remains partially uninhabitable. Contamination spread beyond Japan. Radioactive particles were detected in California, in French wine, in the Arctic. The fishing industry in Fukushima was devastated. Farmers lost cattle and crops. The psychological toll of displacement, stigma, and fear of radiation continues to this day. The disaster was a human tragedy compounded by a failure of transparency. The cover-up was extensive. In 2012, a parliamentary investigation concluded that the disaster was man-made and caused by collusion between TEPCO and regulators. TEPCO executives had ignored tsunami risk assessments and falsified safety reports. The company had also concealed the extent of the meltdown for weeks. In 2017, 3 former TEPCO executives were charged with professional negligence resulting in death and injury. They were acquitted in 2019, a decision that sparked outrage. The government itself was complicit. The Nuclear and Industrial Safety Agency was subordinate to the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, which promoted nuclear power. Whistleblowers were marginalized. The Fukushima disaster revealed a systemic failure in Japan's nuclear governance. Reforms were enacted, but critics argue that the culture of secrecy remains. The cleanup is expected to take 40 years and cost over $200 billion. The decommissioning of the reactors is fraught with technical challenges, and the storage of contaminated water remains a contentious issue. The legacy of Fukushima is a cautionary tale about the dangers of complacency and the cost of secrecy. The disaster led to the shutdown of all of Japan's nuclear reactors. Some have since restarted under stricter regulations. Globally, nuclear safety standards were reviewed, and some countries like Germany accelerated their phase-out of nuclear power. But the fundamental questions remain. Can we ever truly contain the risks of nuclear energy? The IAEA now requires member states to conduct stress tests and improve emergency preparedness. But the human and environmental toll of Fukushima lingers. Over 40,000 people remain displaced, and the exclusion zone is still contaminated. The truth that Japan tried to conceal, that a foreseeable natural disaster could trigger a nuclear catastrophe, is now a matter of public record. The challenge is to ensure that such a failure of accountability never happens again. Subscribe to Nuclear Disasters for more in-depth investigations into the world's most catastrophic events.